beverages, innovation, branding, and marketing growth. India's alcoholic beverage sector is at a pivotal moment, shaped by rising incomes, urbanization, and its a thirst for authenticity and quality. Today, we explore how tradition meets innovation and how local ingredients are crafting global stories. So, to begin this session, I would like to welcome all our panelists, Colonel Sanjay Singhal, Mrs. Ruchika Malhotra, Mr. Arvind Hangi, and Mrs. Ray. And now I would like to invite our moderator, Mr. Anand S. Iyer. India's alcoholic beverage sector is at a pivotal moment, as we all know. Guiding towards convergence is a leader with a deep descriptive in policy and industry dynamics. Let's begin our session, and I would like to hand over this to our moderator, Mr. Iyer, to take it over.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank MOFPI for inviting me over as a moderator for this session in the second edition of World Food India. I'd like to first and foremost welcome my panelists. Colonel Sanjay Singhal is my colleague in the Confederation of Indian Alcoholic Beverage Companies that represents all the domestic Indian companies, in public advocacy and also the well-being of the industry. And we also, coordinate very closely with other industry associations, both in the spirits as well as in the beer space. I have with me Arvind Hangal, who heads marketing for ABD Maestro, which is a part of ABD India Limited. He used to earlier be in marketing in ABD, and he's had many years of experience in building and helping brands succeed. I have Ruchika Malhotra from Pernod Ricard. She heads research and innovation out there, R&D and innovation. She's comes with a very deep background in the consumer space with Unilever, GSK, Pepsi, and now with Pernod Ricard. And I have Anusaya Ray, whom I have met many a times in the MOFPI office when we have joint meetings, on public advocacy. She handles corporate affairs for AB InBev, which is the world's largest beer company. So welcome all of you all, and I'd like to welcome the entire audience here, including officials from the government. As the introducer spoke, and she said that, the alcohol space is becoming very important. Yes, it is. It is an industry that is growing. It's an industry without which a lot of states' revenues will collapse. We are the second or the third largest, revenue generation business or sector, if I may say so, across states, right? So some states get 40,000, 50,000 crores per annum out of tax just because of our industry, which is huge for their state. So, I just went around World Food India, and there are some, alcobev stalls also in one of the pavilions here. And you all should visit it afterwards. If you all do drink, do go for your tastings out there. You'll really have a good evening after that. But drink responsibly, and you can celebrate what you drink. So the second edition of World Food India, has widened the canvas of India's food and beverages ecosystem. So whether it's food, whether it's new food, whether it's organic food, healthy food, whatever, and even across beverages today. You have so many different types of beverages, and you have healthy beverages. So the entire canvas is now becoming wider and wider. There's a lot of research going on. And this research is also impacting the alcohol space. So I'm sure, when Ruchika gets on, she'll talk about it. This year, I'm glad that, they have called the Indian alcohol sector for a conversation like this along with you all. Our entire sector is extremely regulated. We are state-led, we are not center-led. Unlike every other sector in this country, we are state-led. So every year, what the state does determines our future, right? So one day the sun can be shining and suddenly the sun can set. without our any interference, right? It does depends on the whims and fancies of whoever wants to change policy. But it also contributes significantly to India's economy. Yes, there is customs duty that comes in at our ports, right, for imports, and the imports are rising year on year. India is signing a lot of FTAs, so I'm sure imports will rise. And then by itself, also the industry is growing across states, across markets. So it sustains a lot of livelihood, whether it's the farmer, about 5 million plus farmers. We employ the entire industry along with the ancillary industries, trade, etc. Close to about 2 million to 3 million people are employed in this industry. This industry contributes around close to about 3.5 lakh to 4 lakh crores per annum in terms of overall government revenue. So that's how important this industry is for the entire ecosystem. And the good thing is that over the last 2-3 years, whenever we go and meet officials, whether at the center or in the states, liquor is no longer a bad word. It's no longer a taboo, right? It's now accepted as another industry, and we want that acceptance to grow, because there was a time when there was this kind of a shadow effect on the industry saying, yeah, kaisa hai ye, but it's no longer that. You have reputed companies. A lot of our Indian companies are now public limited companies. Their shares are, quoted in the marketplace and, on the BSE, NSE. They're very healthy shares. They have a lot of foreign investors investing in them. The multinationals have come in. All the big multinationals today, more or less, are operating in India, whether in the beer space or in the spirit space. The wine business is also growing, right? A whole lot of farmers, grape farmers, whether in the Nasik area in Maharashtra or in Karnataka, across just outside of Bangalore, a lot of their income comes, out of growing grapes for wine. So it's a huge thing. And what we're now finding is that with the consumption levels, not consumption level, I should say, in the income levels, with the income levels rising year on year in India, right, the aspirations of the Indian, right, is also growing. And all of you must have read about, the India's youth dividend, right? Now, a whole lot of people are coming into the legal drinking age. Most states it's 21. The capital has it as 25. But we are getting about 14 to 15 million consumers being added in the legal drinking age, on a regular annual basis. That is as big as Australia or as big as a lot of European countries. So just imagine. And only yesterday I was hearing a very good research presentation by a very well-known research company out of the UK, which is called, IWSR, right? And their analysis shows that India is, apart from Brazil and a few other countries, is the biggest contributor to growth in the spirits industry in the last 3 to 4 years. And even going forward, it will be India that will be the artisanal spirits, which we'll talk about, right? India has a lot of artisanal spirits. When I say artisanal spirits, because I've heard of tequila and others, right, from various countries, right? You have tequila from Mexico, you have cognac from France, and and so on and so forth. In India, we have Feni from Goa, we have Mahua, right, from a lot of central Indian places, including Maharashtra, right? So there are now branded Mahuas also happening. Then you have our own single malts, which are coming in, right, using Indian 6-row barley, right? Some of them now, they're starting to grow 2-row barley also in India, right? So there are these Indian single malts coming, which are now getting world acclaim, and there are awards being won. A lot of companies are now having luxury spirits. So you have the gins from Goa, and so on and so forth. So you have a lot of these coming in, and the actions hotting up. And we will speak about that also in today's, panel discussion. However, the consumption in India is also very, very low compared to the world, right? Our average per capita consumption is about 1.3 liters. So if you look at other countries, they are all about 10, 15, 20. So we are still a country that doesn't drink much. But the point is not about consumption. The point is how you enjoy it responsibly, how you can, celebrate your occasions with it. And then you have the Gen Z and the millennials, right? They are very conscious of their health. So they like to moderate what they're doing. But even they are seeking new alternatives, which again comes into the R&D and innovation space, where you have, low alcohol or zero alcohol products now coming. Now that's another huge thing that is happening across, right? So whether it's in the West or whether it's in other parts of the world, you're getting that kind of consumption also happening. So what we'll do in today's session is we will look at how we'll chart the way for the industry in terms of consumer trends, government regulations, because we are at the mercy of the government. When I say the government, I'm not talking about the center, but I'm talking about the state governments, mainly the state governments. And what are the ease of doing business? That's one thing we have been talking about forever with various all the state governments. Is how do you, reduce the kind of documentation, the kind of, roadblocks that keep on coming. It happens across industry. You must be reading it in papers that you want to open a restaurant in some states, you need some 100 licenses, right? So you knock on so many doors, right? So how do you do ease of business? So that is something which we need to look at. Plus advances in India's, in alcobev technology worldwide, and how it can be applied into India as well as homegrown technology here. And also finally exports. Exports is the big story, right? And our nodal ministry, which is MOFPI, which has organized this entire, trade fair today and tomorrow, and APIDA, right? They are looking for $1 billion in exports in the next 4 years till 2030, right? 5 years, sorry. Yeah. And we are currently sitting at about 300 million US dollars. Yeah. So we have a long way to go. About 350 million, right? 350 million. So we have 650 million as a gap to fill, right? And the fact is, how do we reach that? You look at a country like Mexico, which exports so much of the alcohol, whether it's their beer, whether it's their tequila. You look at Scotland, right? I mean, look at the amount of exports it does from that little place. So we have a huge potential. Can we export? And you have the Indian diaspora all over the world. Sure, they'll consume us, but we also have the international markets to cater to others, right? So we need to grow, we need to export. And that's one thing we're telling all the states and the center to help the industry, help us become export friendly, our industry become export friendly. Again, ease of doing export. So we'll talk about that also. So the entire point is, how do we, under the framework of Atmanirbhar Bharat, right? And I'm underlining Atmanirbhar Bharat. How do we, as Indian companies, whether we may have an international parentage, but we are in India now and operating as Indian entities, and the homegrown Indian companies, how do all in this ecosystem, how do we contribute to ensuring that we are there at the front end of innovation, we are there in the front end of doing things in a compliant manner, in the right manner, helping not only the government revenues to increase, but at the same time ensuring a profitable growth for the industry and making it win-win for all the stakeholders across. So that is what we're going to discuss today. And I will start with theme 1, which I'll invite Colonel to speak on, which is crafting identity and export enablers. Colonel Sanjay Singhal is the Deputy Director General, CIABC. He's also served with the Indian Army very illustriously for about 27 years. And he will now speak on that. I'll just give you a small context to it. Sake, which you must have heard of, a wine made from rice, is the drink of Japan, right? Soju speaks for Korea, Baiju for China, tequila for Mexico, right? Cognac for the Cognac region in France, Champagne for the Champagne region in France. And we too have, a mahua, right, which is a spirit distilled from mahua flowers. We have feni, right, cashew nut feni, kaju feni, right? We have that. And we have rice brews. I mean, some places you go, you get rice liquor. You need a carbohydrate source to create alcohol. And we have our award-winning single malts. So if we have all this, how do we move forward in creating and crafting this identity? Over to you, Pranav.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be here at the World Food India second edition and speaking on a subject that connects deeply with India's roots. That is the heritage alcoholic beverages. It is indeed encouraging that with the support of the Ministry of Food Processing Industry, the Indian heritage liquors have been brought on this center stage at such a premier international event. More so since, like already mentioned, the alcoholic beverage industry is very deeply regulated and it is also operating in very challenging circumstances and conditions. The Constitution of India also, where Article 47 of the Directive Principle guides the states to endeavor for total prohibition. So with this overhang, the industry has performed remarkably well over the last 70-75 years, even gone well ahead of what we could have. It has not impeded in us growing and innovating, especially in the last 20 years. The industry is extremely grateful to APIDA and DPIIT, which is operating under the Department of Commerce, that is providing necessary support in promoting exports and also helping in registering GI tags for our heritage liquor. I shall now just briefly introduce you to the major heritage liquor that is produced in India. Starting from the north, you have the apricot-derived chulli in Himachal Pradesh. You have then the herbal liquors from Rajasthan, manufactured by the state distillery. The brands are something, one of the popular ones is Kesar Kasturi. Like sir has already mentioned, Mahua is a premier distilled spirit that is manufactured in central India, that is Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra. Then you have the Judima rice wine, which is very popular in Assam, along with Apong, which is found in Assam as well as Arunachal. Both of them are rice generated. We also have Handia, that's another distilled spirit that is the produce of the Jharkhand and the Odisha region, and you have toddy in the south. Apart from this, you have a host of other smaller brews that could range up to almost 80 of them by the Food Safety Authority recently. The GI tag unfortunately has only been registered for Feni, that is 2009, and Judima wine was got a GI tag in 2021. These products and many other hyper-local brews are not just intoxicating beverages, but living traditions and that reflect India's diverse food culture. And there is a need to nurture these products and help them grow both domestically as well as globally. The reason for developing this is this not only represents our heritage, but it also supports the farmers, most predominantly the tribals who are operating in the deep interiors of our country and growing these exotic flowers and producing these delicious wines. They don't seem to be getting the economic benefits of these. And to get such an economic benefit, they have to be tied through GI, and quality standards need to be developed so that they can command a premium not only in Indian markets, even markets abroad. The good thing is that the momentum towards this is building. However, the momentum is very uneven. We were suppressed, as we all know, during the colonial times, and we had this famous or infamous Bombay Abkari Act 1878, and the Maura Act of 1892, both of them made sure that Maua was declared a dangerous intoxicant and a threat to morality and health. Thereby, it was criminalized. And sadly, even when the country gained independence, the Abkari Acts continued to criminalize the growth of Maua and utilization of Maua for distilling spirits. It was only in 2022 that the Madhya Pradesh government took the initiative to declare Maua a heritage liquor and sought to promote its production and sale in the state. However, due to bureaucratic red tapeism, inexperience probably, and not doing proper market study, the whole project collapsed. And the farmers who grew this maua and the projects which were manufacturing this uh, distillate failed to achieve their targeted intentions. We hope that the state government will now learn from these and will try and adopt corrective measures by which this project can be restarted. Uh, the heartening thing is that Maharashtra has recently allowed tribals to produce and market maua in their state. We would like to see how this moves forward. Kerala is also rebranding toddy and bringing it to luxury parlors in the tourist areas of Kerala. So we look forward to the improvement in the ecosystem for the heritage liquor. What is holding back is, like sir has already mentioned, that we have a very fractured or fragmented excise structure in the country. Every state is a country by itself, and there are lots of friction in the interstate movement. There is a very high cost of doing business. There are export fees, import fees, interstate restrictions, and this is making our products unviable for exports. So it will be an interesting thing if the Ministry of Food Processing, which is driving standardization of exports of alcoholic beverages, could also look into standardizing exports of heritage liquor. Though it's a state subject, but probably it would be a wise idea if they can get the heritage liquor on the fast track. Because if we are going to depend on the states, it's going to take forever. Because they have to operate within their rules, which are undoubtedly archaic, date back to the 20th century, early 20th century. There was this issue that these traditional drinks don't have any formal recognition. However, the Food Safety Authority of India has done their job. They have in their new regulations, that is called the Food Safety and Standards Alcoholic Beverage Amendment Regulations 2025, they have included almost 80 Indian brands. Now these products can get the FSSAI certification, which they lack till now, and that can help commercialize their production as well as sale. What the path forward I'm suggesting is quite practical. We need to fast track GI protection for all our important heritage liquors and gain the global IP recognition where required. We need to build infrastructure. A lot of infrastructure already exists in the country, but if we can share, because the product for heritage liquor will be not that much in quantity, they may not be able to sustain economically by building separate infrastructure for them, but they should be allowed to share the existing infrastructure like bottling, etc. And there should also be an export facilitation window for this heritage liquor. For this, APIDA is already working in advanced mode, and they have also assured of embassy support, which is again very key for exporting any product out of India. Most important thing is India must project its heritage spirits as an identity product to promote provenance, culture, and authenticity. To conclude, I would just like to add that we have a lot of local products that can be produced for both domestic and global consumers. It has to be a joint effort of all stakeholders to leverage our heritage and build India's identity in the world market. Thank you. I'm ready to take any questions.
Yeah. What we'll do is I have a couple of questions, and based up that, I'll leave it open for a quick, questions from your end, and then we'll move on to the next speaker. So, Colonel, how do you see the Indian artisanal spirits, which you just spoke about, leveraging GI tagged ingredients as well as their regional identity to position themselves uniquely in the global market?
Yeah. the most important thing is the first step is getting the GI recognition, that is the GI tag. But that's not the only thing. We have to ensure that our products are worthy of being sold. They meet the international standards. The quality standard and certification system should be robust. This will allow the products to achieve the desired quality, and people will appreciate such products. Today, fragmented approach is leading to inconsistencies in quality and driving away genuine consumers. And then there has to be a structured storytelling and branding. The Scotch story didn't start overnight. It has also taken over 400 years. And we have to start from the very beginning. And this is one of the key issues. The promoters, the states, the stakeholders will have to build on this branding of our heritage liquor. The story has to be told well, and it has to be backed by quality.
Do you think that the entire process of getting a GI, including trademark and copyright, right, which is pretty moribund currently in terms of the time that it takes and the kind of red tapeism that there is, do you think that needs to be speeded up? I'm told that the DPIIT, right, is now discussing with the trademark authority and trying to, speeden up the process. But what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you totally. The process of getting a GI tag is very cumbersome, and getting a trademark registration is also a never-ending process that we have also experienced firsthand at our own level. And we are very glad that the Ministry of Commerce and the DPIIT in particular is very, very proactive in this and has been engaging with the industry, not only with the alcohol industry, even with the other food products like makhana, etc., to get a GI tag for every kind of heritage liquor that we have. For that, both the industry has to make a push, the government has to support, and once we have the GI and the trademark registered, we have sky as the limit.
Okay, quickly the next question. What kind of policy support at the state or central level, including whatever the implications of the FTAs that we have just signed or which we'll be signing, right? It could be multilateral or bilateral, right? How do you expect that, including the tariff and non-tariff barriers that exist, right? What do you believe are the most crucial for boosting exports of Indian artisanal beverages and other products from India, including Indian single malts, and other spirits, wine, or beer?
The most important thing is that we are already identified that we need to step up our publicity promotion of our products. And we are very glad that the APIDA is driving this initiative along with the Ministry of Food Processing Industries. We need to participate in a lot of world fairs like Gulf Food, even the Pro Wine, etc. Wherever we can, we need to leverage our embassies for promoting our heritage liquor as well as our single malts. Some of it is already happening. It has already started. Some embassies are only serving Indian-made products in their embassies. The other issue which you brought out was FTAs. At the central level, you are well aware, we have been pushing for equal access to our own products. Right now, we are facing non-tariff barriers for maturation of whiskey in India. And in case we do not meet the maturation requirement for whiskey, our whiskey is being labeled as Indian spirit drink. And our efforts are on with the negotiating teams for different regions to allow, when you give concessions to foreign countries to bring their liquor products into India, we need to have equal access to their market. And unless and until we have access to international markets, there will be no export initiative. Anything that we do here, we will not be able to achieve. So this is one issue which we need the center support. We also need the state support, that they need to create export section in their policy. UP has made a beginning, but all states which are having an export potential must have an export-friendly policy. They should have a section specifically for exports, which makes our exports competitive in the international arena. As it is, our cost of doing business is very high in the country, and all efforts must be made to ensure that there is ease of doing business and the cost of doing business is brought down, especially when we are exporting.
Okay. Thank you, Colonel. Any questions, ladies and gentlemen? It's a small hall. If you have a good loud voice, we can hear you.
That's a very good question. Firstly, it's not only TASMAC. We have many states which have the route to market, which is controlled by the government, even at the retail level. You have Delhi as a prime example. You also have Chhattisgarh. So accessing the market is not going to be difficult. The only thing is, in the case of TASMAC, we have to convince TASMAC that they should market the Indian artisanal spirits. That has to be the intergovernmental issue. Once we have achieved, because you see the steps are very clear, we need to first achieve the desired quality and standards. Then we need to have this certification once we have done this. And that is the time then after that, the product manufacturers have to go in for branding and marketing. Once a product becomes a success, it's only then we can think of breaking it down to different states. So right now we are struggling at the first step itself. In the state of origin, we are unable to get it to scale. So it's a challenge, but this is something which we have identified and we're going to move forward.
And if I may just add to what Colonel said, a lot of states don't recognize these artisanal spirits because their excise policy has been frozen in time in terms of definition. So these all have a background when the British ruled us, right? So a lot of them haven't changed, right? So they need to then make modifications and say, okay, there's an alcohol a product called Mahua, there's something called Feni, there's something called XYZ. So only after that can then you get in. They recognize broadly spirits and wine and beer, but the others categories or subcategories or classifications as artificial spirits need to come in. So that's a process, which is why there are associations and we all go and speak, and then it takes time to convince. But once they get convinced, then it has to follow its own route, and once the file reaches its destination and gets signed, then it comes down and then it comes through. So it could be a year's process, it could be a 2-year process.
The other thing is the Food Safety and Standards Authority has included all these in their standards for alcohol. So now that is a very major step that has been achieved. And I think there are 80 products that have been identified and classified and added as an annexure to the Food Safety and Standards. So that will be a major step in convincing any state government that this is legit. And they have included all ready-to-drink wines. They have done a deep research and they have included almost every possible wine or distilled or undistilled spirit which is being marketed in local population.
But as I said, these are issues that the local bodies have to raise. So it's a time-consuming thing. But I'm glad you made the point. Time is of an issue. So let me go to the next speaker. Thanks a lot for your question. The next theme that we are going to discuss is with Ruchika Malhotra, who heads R&D and innovations in Pernod Ricard. These are advances in brewing, in distillation and fermentation, R&D for product differentiation, and quality enhancement. So Ruchika, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I think I'm very happy to be sharing, my perspectives on how science will shape up the future of innovation for this category. And, we just discussed, and of course, my own perspectives are getting widened when I'm listening to everybody who's around. I think we've already touched upon, but just to set context, we've discussed about the growing potential and the growth trajectory that the industry is seeing in India. And obviously, the consumer trends, the demographics, how the economic stratification, how the social norms are changing, and which is leading to a very, very evident trend in macro trends, in industry trends, in category trends, which I'll pick up a few. I think probably I'll address a few later, but is clearly indicating towards exploration. And exploration could have many, many facets. It is premiumization, and it is also intended lifestyle and responsible choices. All this definitely means that they're seeking some kind of consumer or customers. Just as responsible companies, there is a need for differentiation. And I think I may be biased, but we all are cognizant that differentiation comes from science. In any industry, it comes from science. In fact, here at Bonarica, or my team, in fact, is just an indication of how this interdisciplinary science would come together. And as he indicated, I am now, of course, an Alcobev insider, but I am not conventionally from the Alcobev industry. And it's more FMCG, pharma, healthcare, and many other categories that we worked on. And so is my team. So we have experts who really trained in fermentation technologies and distillation technologies, and engineers and process engineers. But we also have our analytical scientists who are from the pharma industry. I have my portfolio managers who are from the white goods industry. And then you have flavorists who are from, application houses, which means it is the amalgamation of interdisciplinary sciences, consumer sciences. And that's, I think, for the some time, it's going to be how it is. Now, touching upon a few areas which we are here to talk about. I think first, the core of what the business is, right? Ingredients, fermentation, distillation, aging. So, of course, ingredients. I believe innovation, and I will just said because that will be the touch point through the conversation, is either doing better what you're already doing, that is innovation, or you recreate or create new things, that is innovation. So when we come to ingredients, you will pick up ingredients that are, better quality. You will pick up ingredients that are better yield, that are more sustainable sources, use less water, use less energy in the consumption. So that's the first part. But you will use, you're looking at ingredients that Colonel mentioned, indigenous ingredients, exotic ingredients, processes that, really create very different flavor precursors. So you're looking at all that from an ingredients point of view, GI tagged and tagged ingredients. So a plethora of ingredients that have a good output, but also good perception for the consumers. The consumers are becoming very, very aware of what they're consuming. The second is on fermentation. So high precision fermentation technologies, next generation yeasts, the use of enzymes is leading to fermentation technologies being not just rendering excellent consistency and quality, which is again touching to the point that is saying the first and the foremost important for this any category, but definitely for regulated categories like Alcobev, is quality and safety. These are the bedrocks, these are table stakes. You cannot tinker with the quality and safety, and with these precision technologies and innovation in that domain, you guarantee that you are offering quality and safety to the consumers. But then also, like we said, if you use the right fermentation technology combined with the yeasts and the enzymes and the methods and the time temperature combinations by real-time monitoring, you can really create something which is very exciting to the consumers. Same in distillation, hybrid distillation designs of the pot stills, or differential pressure distillation techniques, or in fact distillation techniques that are less carbon intensive or less energy intensive, or it could be mechanical vapor, recompression, thermal, many, there are many that will lead to sustainable outcomes. And finally, even in aging, the very, very conventional, everybody around, especially for a zone 4 country like India, and with the invent of Indian malls in general, maturation on one side, you're trying to manage your angel and your devil losses, angel shares. But on the other side, again, noble woods, indigenous woods, and designs of warehouses or predictive models in how warehouse temperature and relative humidities will impact your profiles. I think all those sciences are coming together. So that's definitely at the core of what you have in terms of the AlcoBev. But what is more interesting is that the adjacent scientific disciplines, for example, sensory science, right? A sensory so called, it is a sensorial experience. But I have seen, even in the last few years, that I've been with the industry, that the adoption of the scientific techniques that the industry is using, from just difference testing to very very nuanced, descriptive or QDA testing, to TDS, temporal dominance, or preference clustering, etc., is becoming more and more center stage to be able to segment that. And why is that happening? Because consumer science is merging with it. So, understanding of semantics, what does your claim or communication mean to the consumer in the changing social context of the consumer trend? Semiotics, what are your signifiers, the colors, the symbols that you're making on packaging, what does it mean? And then sensordonic modeling, which gets on one side expert data and on the other side consumer data to say, hey, I understand that maybe my products are only catering to a certain segment of consumers and they're not even catering to the other segments. So I think that's interdisciplinary, and of course, analytical sciences. We have our good old, very reliable, but now becoming very, very sensitive and very precise, the GCMS, the LCMS, the UPLCs, the ICPMS, which AlcoBev was historically seen as an art. It is. It's a beautiful art. But when merged with the science, real-time, inline, pH, analytical, metabolites, congeners, monitoring, again, you deliver quality, you deliver efficiency, but you deliver, if you tweak with them little by little, experiment, your design of experiments, you generate products that are very meaningful to the consumers. Same in packaging. Packaging is definitely earlier, it was the aesthetic science of it. But that is evolving, the tactile finishes in packaging, the varnishes, what other features can come, but also structural science. And I want to lightweight my bottles, I want to lightweight our packs, I want paper that is probably made from waste material, it's more sustainable. There's structural science, there is material science, there is aesthetic science, understanding recyclability, advanced recycling techniques, that you can create food contact material that is also getting introduced in. And because sustainability, again, for all companies and the consumers, maybe we in the maturity index of where our consumers could be sitting, India could be, but it's definitely evolving. The global rub-offs are now very easy in the age of the Instagram and trend. So responsibility of now, earlier companies were more value engineering. You design something and you improve it. It's a continuous improvement journey. But now design to sustainable value, making choices of designs or materials that are sustainable from the beginning is becoming a choice. And that as R&D, how R&D incorporates it without impacting efficiencies is becoming important. And similarly, I think future technologies, the future lies in the integration of biotechnology, of digital and data, AI. We are seeing already the emergence of AI in reducing developmental cycles. I think it's going to be mainstream very, very soon, because, speed to market will become the new currency even for innovation. And I just end with the thought that I think where India is for almost every we were there on the center stage for technology, and technology heads, all the GCCs are coming to India in the biggest way. R&D friendly regulations, or regulations shaped by R&D, will really help in India being able to innovate for India, which is such a big and high potential base to cater to, but also for India to be able to cater to the globe. So, yeah, thank you for your attention. And thank you.
Thank you. fact, some of the questions I wanted to ask, you've already answered it in your talk. I think it was very illuminating, right? If there are any questions from the audience, you might please address it to her. So it's all open to you all. Any questions? None? Okay, I just have one question then. You're having a lot of low alcohol products now coming in, adjunct products, if I may ask, if I say so, whether they are RTDs, whether they are seltzers, whether they are tea-based, low alcoholic drinks, they're all becoming popular elsewhere in the world. How do you see that playing out in India? Right, sure, there are some seltzers which have come into India, but they're very, very small right now and more urban centric. But how do you see that play out? And what do you think that the traditional spirit guys, which most companies are in that sense, how are they looking at it, and how do you see it evolve?
So I'll tap into first the consumer trends or the macro trends that we look at. I think apart from exclusivity, authenticity, and sustainability, intentional lifestyles and intentional lifestyles mean informed choices, or maybe drinking better, drinking lower is an intended lifestyle. We are seeing that emerge. It is coming in India as well, and therefore probably the changeover started from adjacent categories, a lot of non-alcoholic offerings that could be, and one more trend that I want to touch upon. I think in this age, which is emerging from higher disposable incomes, the in-home drinktainment or the on-premise entertainment is a real thing. Consumers want a little drama around what they're drinking, a little Instagrammable stuff. And with the emergence of that, but also time is a scarce resource. They double, income and both partners working. Time is a scarce resource in today's time. And therefore, the emergence of adjacent categories, which could be non-alcoholic offerings, which pair well, and there's less time to just, and again, the social norms. More people who are not drinking earlier are drinking light, drinking different, maybe women, but specifically saying it's just women, catering to those audience who want that diversity. Good tasting drinks started with a lot of non-alcoholic mixers. We have a portfolio of about 10 to 13 of them now, but also RTDs. But RTDs will come to India. RTDs globally for even Pernod is a highly growing category. But in India, one, with the regulation friendliness, but also with the go-to-market strategy in a hot country, how are you managing the cold chains, etc., will enable that. That's the other scientific or the supply chain evolution, but that evolution will definitely come to India in the way of these products. Maybe we need to test, pivot, improve, but that is one trend that we foresee will be worth trying.
Yeah, thank you. So that actually brings me to theme 3, which is with Arvind Hangal, who is the Director Marketing and Special Accounts for EBD Maestro, which is on startups and innovators. So that just picks up from, where Ruchika left. As the marketing engine, how are RTDs, right, or any new age drinks, the digital storytelling, as it were, how are they changing the distribution and brand economics? And, how can you just expound on that, right? And tell us how, these things change, how consumers discover and buy. Can Indian companies, right? There's a lot of startups. They find it much easier abroad to scale. But, here, given the fact that it's such a fragmented market with state policies and definitions and what have you, route to market in India is extremely difficult, right? It's easier, I think, climbing Mount Everest than actually, getting and navigating most of our, regulatory landscape. So how do you see that, and if you could just talk about that, and then the questions can flow.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me here. The reason why EBD Maestro, which is the company that I belong to, can talk about startups is because EBD Maestro is pretty much a startup within the parent organization, which is EBD. And what we have set out to do is to look at the super premium and the luxury segments within the alcohol space in India. And we are a very young organization, barely about 6 months into play, and pretty much a startup mentality. If I were to try to decode the question and in a way break it down, there are primarily three key mantras, three key pillars around which startups, smaller organizations, and let's say, for instance, the newer product formats like an RTD, or for that matter, even the delivery channels in terms of a D2C can operate. Disclaimer here, however, that D2C in India today, currently, there is possibly only a West Bengal or Odisha which allows for direct delivery of alcohol products to home. The rest of the markets may have it in an informal basis, but not on a formal basis. To first kick off, and one of the mantras that you will realize that is happening, and I think most of the panelists here have covered that, but let me just try to crystallize that into one word, which is about exclusivity. I think Ruchika also mentioned that. And it is this continuous pursuit of consumers looking for the next best thing, which is what happens with phones, which is what happens with TVs, which is what happens with cars, and pretty much happens with the alcohol industry as well. If I were to look at the spirits industry in India, be it a startup or be it the legacy players, quality today is pretty much a given. I don't think any company in India today makes, at least in the alcohol industry, makes bad product intentional. Pretty much everyone is doing a good product. And therefore, the exclusivity comes from what goes into making that product, and which is where ingredients start to play a very critical role. That also gives you a certain amount of badge value. If I were to look at the startups, and Goa has been a hub for the last couple of years, at least as far as the spirits industry is concerned, and look at the ingredient story that is going into making all of these products. There are a set of brands that we have, for instance, and I'm not plugging my brands, but I'm just giving you context in terms of how the ingredients can play a story. So we have a gin called Pumori. Pumori, the name comes from the legendary Mount Pumori. There is no, it's not legendary. There is a Mount Pumori right next to the Everest, and she is traditionally been known as the daughter of Mount Everest. And we have a gin there. And why? What is the connection? The connection is that Himalayan juniper, it goes into making Pumori, and therefore there is that ingredient story that we have, which is local, which is indigenous, which again draws from the name, and therefore creates this whole thing about adding to the whole imagery around the product, the whole exclusivity around the product. There is another brand that we have called Segredo Aldea, which also comes with a cafe rum expression. And the coffee beans that go into making that product come from this specific coffee estate in Chikmagalur, which again is the coffee hub. So therefore, exclusivity is one of the mantras that startups tend to look at, because at that scale where you're looking at very exclusive ingredients at small batches, for instance, Pumori, we make only 200 liters at a time. That's the small batch. And it pretty much beats all codes that at least most alcohol players operate with in terms of economies of scale. So you're looking at just 200 liters every time. It's a nightmare, trust me, to get everything together and to convince our now unit at EBD to make it. But that's the beauty. And that's the whole thing about craft. And you'll have heard about craft coming up everywhere. You'll have heard about craft gins. You'll have heard about craft spirits. That's the whole essence of craft. It's that whole exclusivity that no one else has. It's in small batches. And therefore, it is exclusive to this certain set of people that can access it or get it. Right? So that's the first mantra that at least startups and to a large degree smaller players are dealing with. The second mantra that you have, and which helps the cause, is experimentation. Consumers today, and I'm pretty sure most of us sitting here, like I said, are always continuously experimenting with what's new. I want something new. It could be, for instance, the fact that I've always been a whiskey drinker. There is a new RTD that has come in. There is possibly a new gin that has come in with an exclusive ingredient. I'm willing to try that out. There have been, and consumer trends also suggest that consumers typically will choose alcohol spirit basis occasion, basis the moment at which they're consuming, right? And therefore you have this whole culture of how consumers typically have a repertoire of of products that they are experimenting with or drinking with. What that experimentation essentially leads to is discovery, is brand discovery, and which is where it helps startups as well. Because if you're at least available when the consumer is looking out for that new thing, for that new experience, for that new thing, when he's wanting to experiment, then there is always a chance, there is always an opportunity that you're creating for the consumer to try out a new brand. It could be a startup, a new product format, it could be an RTD, or for that matter, it could be a new brand in gin, vodka, whiskey, what have you. The third mantra, which again comes from consumer trends and what we have been seeing, is experience. And I know it's the most cliched word that gets used, at least in the alcohol industry, but it is pretty much the reality, and it is here to stay. Consumers are looking for experiences. I think Ruchika mentioned about drinktainment, which is about in-house consumption, house parties, etc. happening, and what is the other experiences that I can draw there? How can brands participate in that house party? You have a whole rash of cocktail bars now opening up across the country, right? Like yesterday I was in Gurgaon, I was at one, and maybe 10 years back, maybe even 5 years back, you wouldn't have imagined the fact that you had bars focusing only on cocktails. And yes, there is food there, but the fact that you've got cocktails, and again, there is a spirit that gets used, has some uniqueness about it. But at the same time, the cocktail ingredients also have some unique story about them. And that is where the whole experience comes into play. You've got companies, you've got people creating occasions as to how you can go out and traditionally it has been music, traditionally it has been sport, but increasingly now startups and young and smaller companies are looking to play with experiences as one of the platforms to go out and introduce and talk to consumers about their brands. So I think if I were to look at therefore that whole story about the India story, so be it in terms of ingredients, be it in terms of how experimentation is happening within consumers, and also this whole quest for newer experiences. There is this old Japanese Zen saying which says, if not now, when? And if not you, who? I think it pretty much summarizes what the alcohol industry is going through today.
Very well said. I think if there are any questions, you might be directed to our list. Any questions?
Hello, sir.
Hi.
I'm from Rajasthan. Could you tell me about the
I
industry?
can't hear you well. If you can just speak up a bit louder.
Sure, sir. I'm from Rajasthan. As you know, Rajasthan has thousands of heritage varieties. As the Colonel Saab also told me that the varieties which you introduced earlier. So, my question is that is a government, without government support and without the government subsidies, how can the heritage variety will expand, and how the alcohol industry and the winery was competition itself in the competitive market.
Right. So I think
I'm also know about the certain varieties, the Principality States varieties like the Jindagi Baksh from the Kishangarh, Asha from the Mewad, the Pratikalu from the Udaipur, and the Kannauj from the Wagad, Baswada district. There are such as the heritage and very precious varieties. But without the government support, how can the varieties will lead the market?
right. So, and I'll go back to one point that I mentioned previous to this, that you would be aware about how Goa seems to have emerged as a hub for brands to come out of, as pretty much the source for newer brands, smaller brands to come out of. And without sounding facetious, it is despite the government rather than because of the government, right? So therefore, yes, government subsidies, government help does matter. It does lead to a lot of help. But if I were to look at that whole industry, that whole startup hub that has emerged in Goa, has done pretty much without that. But to take on the question further, if you were to look at how do these heritage brands, how do they prosper and how do they grow? The panel today did cover about GI tagging. And that pretty much is formal, in a way, protection for that kind of a brew. But look at, again, the fact that you've got this whole interest in the India story, not just in India, but even abroad. Now, there could be multiple channels that could open up for heritage brands within India. It could be in the regular channels, be it off-premise, on-premise, but there is also the large travel retail channel. So India is a destination for tourists to come in, and if there were, what's the right word? If there was memorabilia or if there was souvenirs that people wanted to carry back from India, can these heritage liquors become those markers of what India stands for to the outside world? Similarly, if I were to look at the travel retail channel outside of India, globally, that is again another great channel for us to position heritage brands there, because it gives you an audience to the whole wide world. So that is one of the things that from a channel perspective, there is off-premise, on-premise in India, but there is also this travel retail channel. The other channel that possibly the heritage brands can look at is the exports channel, which is what I think Anant also mentioned. There is a huge Indian diaspora that stays outside the country in multiple parts of the world. And are there ways and means that you can reach out the product both to the consumer there, but more importantly also get the product in terms of heritage brands to the Indian audiences there. The third thing that you can again bring in is, one is the Indian audiences, but there is also a huge explosion of Indian restaurants across the world. So if I were to look at New York, if I were to look at London, the restaurants that get really talked about, in addition to whatever comes in Michelin, is the Indian restaurants. And what better way for consumers, be it Indian, global, to experience heritage brands than being available and then being able to sample that with Indian food. So there are multiple ways that, like you said, without government subsidy, without government help, that heritage brands can really make a name for themselves.
Sorry, we're running out of time, so if you don't mind, I'd like to go to the last speaker. Thanks, Arvind. I think that was very well brought out point of, travel and retail and, Indian F&B outside of India and the international diaspora. Now it's over to Anusaya Ray. She heads corporate affairs in AB InBev, and she's going to talk about Indian market access and route to market and excise compliance. I know we're running short on time, so you just need to speed it up. But why don't you just kick off?
Sure. Thanks, Anand. And good evening, everyone. And of course, good evening to my fellow panelists. I think the thing that we are here today and discussing the alcohol beverage sector talks volumes about how the country has moved and has kind of opened up the sector to talk, at least earlier. Traditionally considered as a sin sector, right? And traditionally associated with all things sin. That we are together today talking, of course, speaks volumes. But I'd like to take a step back and to look at the country, because whenever I look at India, I look at two Indias, The India, which has, and I think Ruchika mentioned very nicely that she talked about alcohol beverage as an art. I would also say alcohol beverage is a culture. Because if you go to our mythical, our myths, our legends, our books, you can see a Somras, right? You can look at a Lord Shiva having ganja and bhang. And where we are sitting, you cross the road and you see the temple of Bhairav Mandir, where the offering is spirits, right? So in a country which is dominated by prohibition, these things still exist. So India, as usual, is a country of paradoxes and of diversity. There's everything which is diverse here in the country. So here is one thing where spirit is kind of regarded as a spiritual offering, and the other thing where the entire sector is under prohibition. And when I look at this country, 29 states of India are actually 29 different countries where everything is governed by state excise policies. And the federal government only comes in when there is a discussion about investments into the states. Beyond that, the federal control kind of ends and it's the state which takes over. So much so today, when I joined alcohol beverage for about 5 years back from FMCG, the first time my induction was happening and the person of the supply chain kept on talking about, we are exporting from here and importing there. And I was wondering, what is he talking about? We're just sending goods from Bangalore, from Karnataka to say Hyderabad. Where is the export and import happening? Till such time, he actually told me that, you need export and import passes to kind of travel borders, which is just I think to some extent, how are we doing it in today's day and age? And to top it all, when the goods are getting transferred from one border to another border, there is actually a person from excise who's sitting inside that truck to ensure that inter-border transfer happens. So in today's day and age, when we are looking at our food delivery through Blinkit, through Zomato, to Swiggy, that we are dependent on a person, not on a GPS tagging, is something which is, where the alcohol beverage industry needs to come together and work on, to talk to excise, to talk about state excise, that, things need to change. And there is an India which is sitting here, upwardly mobile, demographics which are changing, premiumization, we all talked about it. But when you look at these archaic systems, this can't be an industry norm, right? Similarly, excise policies are changing every year. Every year, 1st April, the entire excise policy changes. And what happens with that, the entire labels that you see on our bottles are changing, right? And what happens because of that? Lots of inefficiencies in terms of costs and resources. For example, everything now goes for renewals, and every renewal meaning lots and lots of money we're getting, and not only money, people, energy, resources getting into it. And we were doing a rough calculation, and we saw that overall the alcohol beverage space is every year on an annual basis renewing about 100,000 labels, right? And not only that, just that, the brewery shift operation and the distillery, the shift operations, for every additional shift operation, you're paying money to the government to get a shift operation running, which is, again, why are we doing that? Any alcohol beverage, we are all serving to the needs of the consumer. Why can't an alcohol beverage be also treated like an FMCG? There at FMCG, we are not asking for shift permissions, annual, so even, this export permit conundrum also. What happens is that the export permissions are generally sought on quarterly basis. So every quarter, companies are going to the excise officer, sitting there with their files and asking for export renewals. Why can't the government have, annual export permit? And these are some of the things that, as the entire alcohol beverage, industry association is coming to the governments and talking about how this ease of businesses can be changed, how can we have new laws and governance which can do this. That essential compliance structure of this industry really, really needs to look at. Also, there's a lot on talk about transparency and compliance in how the supply chain operates. But do we have the transparency? I would say no currently. But can we have? Of course. Because if you look at today's day and age, there's so much of talk on blockchain technology, how you can have end-to-end transparency. Even today, when you don't have a GPS, you don't have, that kind of transparency in supply chain. Can be introduced blockchain. And there are various parts of the world where blockchain is kind of looked at. And at ABNWF, we are manufacturing brands like Budweiser, Hoegaarden, Stella, Corona, etc. here in India. And every time we are talking to the government, we are talking about the investments, the economic, freedom that we're giving to various communities, etc., which are employed in our breweries. We see a lot of potential in the country, and that's why we remain invested in India. But also to remain invested in India, we need certain, incentives coming to the government, wherein there is no product-linked incentives related to the alcohol sector. We might get incentives around land, water, energy, but there is no product-linked incentive because alcohol is still considered under the prohibition sort of a list. The last but not the least is the recent GST reforms that have happened. India is talking about GST 2.0, etc. Alcohol, obviously, as per constitution, is not into GST. But please remember, all our inputs are into GST. For example, in the beer industry uses barley, malt, etc., and all these things. Everything is under GST, but the end product is not. Therefore, what happens? Our pricing increases. The consumer end pricing also increases. And also, when we do pricing, please remember, government controls the costs. So our cost cards are defined how the government defines as per various slabs, etc. So there's a lot of complication every time when people want to invest into alcohol beverages as a sector. But at the same time, as every panelist mentioned over here, India's time is here and now. And how do we, tweak these laws and kind of look ahead, get some benchmarks from across the world, and there are many, and just kind of implement into the country, which has, of course, seen a lot of change. And as I mentioned, today's change, sitting over here and talking about this industry, is obviously a step forward in the journey. Thank you.
That was short and quick, but extremely comprehensive. So thank you all. I think we are way behind time, so I'll just conclude. by thanking my fellow panelists here. So thank you all. And thank you all as an audience for listening to us patiently. I hope you all have got an insight into the industry, the challenges that we face, the opportunities that we have, right? Not only in the country, but even in exports. So I hope you all have a lot of takeaways. Thank you and goodbye.